discuss experiments, collecting data, and let's start with variability. When we talk about variability, we're talking about the amount by which the pieces of data in a set differ, how much they vary, how different are they. It's important to understand that different types of variability when we're designing an experiment or examining any type of data. So let's look at different types of the variability, because some of them we may not even really think about to begin with. So the first type is measurement variability. When we talk about measurement variability, suppose 20 students measure the length of a board. Okay, so the length of the board has not changed. So we take a board and each person measures it. Now, part of it may depend on what each student uses to measure it with. So 5 students may use a yardstick. Some students may use a measuring tape. And each of these things may be marked differently. If you look at your different utensils, some of those are marked differently as to how accurate they can measure. Another thing is when we look at measurements, think about how accurately you look at the measurement. Do you kind of eyeball it and say, well, that's about 6 feet 3 inches? Somebody else looks at it, no, that's 6 feet 3 1/8 inch. Somebody else might look at it and say, well, actually that's 6 feet 2 15/16 inches type of thing. We all measure things slightly different because we all see that it ends a little bit differently. And so that's where we get measurement variability. We see this in the kitchen as well. 1 cup. Okay, do you measure from the bottom of the viscosity curve or the top, or where do we measure it from? Type of thing. The second type of variability that we're going to talk about is natural variability. Any 2 individuals are different. So we all have natural variability. Even genetically identical twins, they differ. If you've ever known a set of identical twins, their personalities differ. Even they do have some features that may differ. I grew up with a set of identical twins. Their biggest difference was definitely their personalities. Now, they weren't that different. Their looks were very similar, but like their metabolism was different. Their competitiveness was a little different. Their strengths and weaknesses in school was a little different. So even genetically, they are identical, but there's some natural variability, because even if you have 2 plants that are exactly the same, there's natural variability because of how we water them, where we set them in the sunshine, that type of thing. But that gets us more into experimental variability. When I'm talking about where we put things, how much we water them, those are factors that we can alter. those are things that change, that we can actually study. How much sunshine? How much water? Does the location actually change the experiment? Identical twins, their personalities, that type of thing, that's just in their genetics. They're different for a different reason, type of thing. Experimental variability, we are controlling something. We are looking at what's happening to these atoms. The final item that we look at for variability is sampling variability. This is like we're selecting a group of college students and we measure their reaction to a question. Well, their reaction to a question may be totally different if I look at nursing students versus culinary arts students. Or if I look at welding students. Or if I compare our online population to our face-to-face population. In other words, if I vary my sampling, my responses may be completely different. So how I sample can create a variability in my statistics. And so we have to be careful about the variability, and so we have to pay attention to the role of the context, because it is important that each of these variabilities is somewhat acceptable, but we have to look at how acceptable will it be. In other words, if I'm studying a question that is specific to nursing students, okay, I want to look at just the nursing students. And so that variability will be acceptable. But if I'm looking at the college as a whole, and I'm talking about, would you prefer to offer face-to-face classes or more night classes, I don't want to look at strictly my online students. I want to look at face-to-face and online students. In other words, I want to get a good mixture of the students. So those are some things that to consider when you look at your samples, when you look at the questions that you make, and things like that.